Good evening, little ones. This is Grandma Carla, and I decided I would read you a story, and I picked the tale of Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle. The tale of Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle. And this is by Beatrix Potter, and I'm going to show you the pictures. Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Lucy who lived at a farm called Llittle. She was a good little girl, only she was always losing her pocket handkerchiefs. One day, little Lucy came into the farmyard crying. Oh, she did cry so. I've lost my pocket hankin. 3 hankins and a penny. Have you seen them, Tabby Kitten? There's a picture of her coming to Tabby Kitten and saying she lost her handkerchief. The kitten went on washing her white paws, so Lucy asked a speckled hen, Sally Henny Penny, have you found 3 pocket handkins? But the speckled hen ran into the barn, clucking, I go barefoot, barefoot, barefoot. And there's the picture of the little hen running into the barn. Grandma has to put the phone down to turn the page. And then Lucy asked Cock Robin sitting on a twig. Cock Robin looked sideways at Lucy with his bright black eye, and he flew over a stile and away. Lucy climbed upon the stile and looked up the hill behind Llittle, a hill that goes up, up into the clouds as though it had no top. And a great way up the hillside, she thought she saw some white things spread upon the grass, and Lucy scrambled up the hill as fast as her stout legs would carry her. She ran along a steep pathway up and up until Llittle was right away down below. She could have dropped a pebble down the chimney. Let's see if you can see that tiny picture. You see the little picture? Ooh, there's another picture. See how high up above Llittle she is? She's way up there. Do you think she should have gone so far away without telling her mommy? Grandma's got to turn the page. Presently, she came to a spring bubbling out from the hillside. Someone had stood a tin can upon a stone to catch the water, but the water was already running over, for the can was no bigger than an egg cup. And where the sand upon the path was wet, there were footmarks of a very small person. Lucy ran on and on. The path ended under a big rock. The grass was short and green, and there were clothes props cut from the bracken stems, with lines of plaited rushes and a heap of tiny clothespins. But no pocket handkerchiefs. See if you can see that tiny picture. But there was something else. A door straight into the hill, and inside it someone was singing. Lily white and clean, oh, with little frills between, oh, smooth and hot, red rusty spot, never here be seen, oh. She's looking at the door. Grandma's got to turn the page. Lucy knocked once, twice, and interrupted the song. A little frightened voice called out, "Who's that?" Lucy opened the door, And what do you think there was inside the hill? A nice clean kitchen with a flagged floor and wooden beams, just like any other farm kitchen. Only the ceiling was so low that Lucy's head nearly touched it, and the pots and the pans were small, and so was everything there. There's Lucy walking in the door, and look how small the door is. Everything is tiny. There was a nice, hot, singy smell, and at the table, with an iron in her hand, stood a very stout, short person staring anxiously at Lucy. Her print gown was tucked up, and she was wearing a large apron over her striped petticoat. Her little black nose went sniffle, 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 and her eyes went twinkle, twinkle, and underneath her cap, where Lucy had yellow curls, that little person had prickles. So instead of hair, she has prickles. There she is. There's Lucy looking at this strange creature. Grandma's got to turn the page. "Who are you?" said Lucy. "Have you seen my pocket handkins?" The little person made a bob curtsy. "Oh, yes, if you please'm. My name is Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle. Oh, yes, if you please'm. I'm an excellent clear starcher." And she took something out of a clothes basket and spread it on the ironing blanket. There's Mrs. Piggle-Winkle, and she is showing her the cloth. "What's that thing?" said Lucy. "That's not my pocket handkin." "Oh, no, if you please'm. That's a little scarlet waistcoat belonging to Cock Robin." And she ironed it, and she folded it, and she put it on one side. And then she took something else off a little clothes horse. "That isn't my penny," said Lucy. "Oh, no, if you please'm. That's a damask tablecloth belonging to Jenny Wren. Look how it's stained with currant wine. It's very bad to wash," said Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle. Let me show you the tiny picture. There's one tiny picture. And there's the other tiny picture. She's getting the cloth off the clothes line. Now I have to turn the page. Miss Tiggy-Winkle's nose went sniffle, 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 and her eyes went twinkle, 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 and she fetched another hot iron from the fire. "There's one of my pocket handkins," cried Lucy, "and there's my penny." Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle ironed it and goffered it and shook out the frills. "Oh, this is lovely," said Lucy. There's Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle getting the irons out of the stove. And there's her showing Lucy her little handkerchief. Or her little penny, maybe. That's her penny. I'm a-coming back. And what are those lovely long things with fingers like gloves? See, Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle is holding up something that has fingers. Oh, that's a pair of stockings belonging to Sally Hennypenny. Look how she's worn the heels out with scratching in the yard. She'll very soon go barefoot, said Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle. Why, there's another hankersniff. But it isn't mine. It's red. Oh no, if you please, that one belongs to old Mrs. Rabbit, and it did so smell of onions. I'd had to wash it separately. I can't get out the smell. There's another one of mine, said Lucy. Page turn. What are those funny little white things? That's a pair of mittens belonging to Tabby Kitten. I only have to iron them. She washes them herself. There's my last pocket hankin, said Lucy. And what are you dipping into the basin of starch? They're little dicky shirt fronts belonging to Tom Titmouse. Most terrible particulars, said Miss Tiggy-Winkle. Now I've finished my ironing. I'm going to air some clothes. Page turn. What are these dear soft fluffy things, said Lucy. Oh, those are woolly coats belonging to the little lambs at Skelgill. Will their jackets take off? Said Lucy. Oh, yes, if you please, Look at the sheep mark on the shoulder, and here's one marked at Gatesgarth, and 3 that come from Littletown. They're always marked at washing, said Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle. And she hung up all sorts and sizes of clothes, small brown coats of mice, and one velvety black moleskin waistcoat, and a red tailcoat with no tail belonging to Squirrel Nutkin, and a very much shrunk blue jacket belonging to Peter Rabbit, and a petticoat, not marked, that had gone lost in the washing. And at last the basket was empty. There she is with Lucy. And there she is hanging up all the clothes on the clothesline. Page turn. Then Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle made tea, a cup for herself and a cup for Lucy. And they sat before the fire on a bench and looked sideways at one another. Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle's hand holding the teacup was very, very brown and very, very wrinkly with the soap suds, and all through her gown and her cap there were hairpins sticking wrong end out, so that Lucy didn't like to sit too near her. When they had finished tea, they tied up the clothes in bundles, and Lucy's pocket handkerchiefs were folded up inside her clean pinny and fastened with a silver safety pin. And then they made up the fire with turf and came out and locked the door and hid the key under the door sill. And there's Lucy having tea with Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle. And there they are getting all the clothes bagged up to take back to their owners. Page turn. Then, away down the hill trotted Lucy and Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle with the bundles of clothes. All the way down the path, little animals came out of the fern to meet them. The very first that they met were Peter Rabbit and Benjamin Bunny. And she gave them their nice clean clothes, and all the little animals and birds were so very much obliged to dear Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle, so that at the bottom of the hill, when they came to the stile, there was nothing left to carry except Lucy's one little bundle. There's Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle giving the animals their clothes. And then she gave some to the little mice because they had some clothes. You see the little mice? And then down here, there's nothing left but Lucy's little parcel. Page turn. Lucy scrambled up the stile with the bundle in her hand, and then she turned to say good night and to thank the washerwoman. But what a very odd thing! Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle had not waited either for thanks or for the washing bill. She was running up the hill, and where was her white frilled cap and her shawl and her gown and her petticoat? And how small she had grown, and how brown, and how covered with prickles. Why, Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle was nothing but a hedgehog. Now, some people say that little Lucy had been asleep upon the stile, but then how could she have found 3 clean pocket handkins and a penny, pinned with a silver safety pin? And besides, I have seen that door into the back of the hill called Cat Bells. And besides, I am very well acquainted with dear Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle. There's Lucy staring after Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle. And that's what she saw as Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle ran away. Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle is a hedgehog. Now, what do you think? Do you think that Lucy was asleep on the stile? Or do you think that Mrs. Tiggy-Winkle really was dressed up in those clothes and ironing? I will read you some more tomorrow. This is Grandma Carla with stories for little ones. God bless.